You remember the 1980s as the good old days, and they were. They were also, by today's legal standards, kind of criminal. Hey there, nostalgia lovers! Welcome to Nostalgia Area. Here's the thing about the 1980s. Nobody thought we were doing anything dangerous. Most people were just living, doing what everyone else did, doing what commercials told them was normal. Some of these habits were eventually banned outright. Others got heavily restricted, reformulated, or quietly phased out once science, lawsuits, and regulators finally caught up. And honestly, looking back now, it's amazing any one of us survived long enough to become nostalgic about it. Some of these you already know. A few are going to surprise you, and at least one of them is something you personally did without thinking twice. Let's rewind. In 1985, candy cigarettes were everywhere. Chalky white sticks packaged to look exactly like real cigarette brands. Some even puffed powdered sugar when you blew through it. Canada banned them in the 1980s over concerns they normalized smoking for children. Other countries restricted them heavily over time. The candy survived, the imitation didn't. Every house had a Mercury thermometer, a skinny glass tube filled with shiny silver liquid that looked weirdly fascinating when you were a kid. You stuck it under your tongue, waited 2 full minutes, then held it up to the light like you were decoding government secrets. The problem was the mercury. If the thermometer broke, that liquid metal spread into tiny beads that released toxic vapor into the air. By the early 2000s, mercury thermometers were heavily restricted or banned across much of North America. The 1980s used enough hairspray to qualify as weather modification. And the propellant inside many of those aerosol cans, chlorofluorocarbons or CFCs, was actively damaging the ozone layer. Scientists discovered the ozone layer over Antarctica was thinning dramatically in 1987. By the mid-1990s, CFC aerosols were banned in the United States. Lawn darts was a game where people casually threw heavy metal spikes across the yard, while children wandered nearby unsupervised. Between 1970 and 1988, lawn darts sent thousands of Americans to the emergency room. Several accidents involving children turned fatal. In 1988, the Consumer Product Safety Commission banned the sale of lawn darts in the United States. Honestly, when you look at them now, they do seem less like toys and more like medieval weapons with good marketing. Road trips in the 1980s operated under a very different understanding of the phrase safe driving. In several states, passengers could legally ride around with open alcohol in the car. In some places, enforcement was so loose the rules barely existed at all. Then came the 1990s, federal highway funding pressure and stricter state laws. Today, an open container in the passenger compartment can lead to tickets, fines, or probable cause for additional stops in most states. The reason 1980s snack food tasted impossibly rich wasn't magic. It was trans fats. Partially hydrogenated oils were packed into everything. Cookies, snack cakes, microwave popcorn, fast food fries. They made food cheap, shelf-stable, and delicious. They also turned out to be terrible for the human cardiovascular system. The FDA officially banned partially hydrogenated oils in 2018. Meaning the exact chemical formula behind some of your favorite childhood snacks would violate modern food regulations today. Asbestos was the miracle building material of the mid-20th century. Every school built before 1980 was loaded with it. The problem was that asbestos fibers, once airborne, caused mesothelioma, a cancer with a latency period of 20 to 50 years. You could breathe it in as an 8-year-old and not know until you were 60. The EPA began regulating asbestos heavily through the 1980s. A comprehensive federal ban was finalized in 2024, with full phase-out required by 2037. Every single car that drove past you in the 1980s was burning leaded gasoline and expelling lead particulates directly into the air. Kids breathed it in on the way to school. It settled in the soil in front of every house on every street. It got tracked inside on shoes. Lead is a potent neurotoxin with no safe exposure level. The U.S. fully banned leaded gasoline for on-road vehicles in 1996. Soft, squeezable plastic, bath toys, teething rings, rubber ducks. The chemical that made them pliable was a class of compounds called phthalates, specifically DEHP. which has been linked to hormone disruption and reproductive development issues in children. The US and EU now ban concentrations above 0.1% of DEHP in toys and childcare articles. The rubber duck your sibling chewed on in 1984 would be pulled from shelves today. Before airbags became standard, putting a child in the front seat wasn't dangerous. It was just convenient. When airbags became federally mandated in the 1990s, researchers realized that airbags are engineered for adult bodies. The explosive force that protects a grown adult in a frontal collision can seriously injure a small child in the same position. Federal regulations were rewritten. Today, placing a young child unrestrained in the front seat can result in a citation, a child welfare investigation, and legal liability after a crash. If you grew up rural in the 1980s, you already know this one. You sat in the bed of a pickup truck with cousins, dogs, lawn chairs, and absolutely no restraints whatsoever. You held onto the side rail and trusted physics to do the right thing. Most states and provinces now heavily restrict or prohibit passengers riding in pickup beds, especially minors. The truck stayed the same, the legal department did not. The term Latchkey Kid tells you everything about how normal this once was. Kids came home alone. They unlocked the house themselves, made a snack, watched TV, and waited for their parents to get home from work. Today, several states have minimum age laws for leaving children unsupervised. In some places, doing exactly what millions of kids routinely did in 1984 could trigger a visit from Child Protective Services. Every commercial flight in the 1980s had a smoking section, usually 5 rows behind the non-smoking section. You boarded the plane already smelling cigarettes. The ashtrays were built into the armrests. Federal smoking bans started rolling out in the late 1980s and expanded quickly through the 1990s. But here's the strange part. Many airplanes kept the ashtrays installed long after smoking was banned, because regulators realized that if somebody ignored the law and lit a cigarette anyway, they still needed somewhere safe to put it out. For decades, millions of parents used hard, clear plastic bottles made with BPA, bisphenol A, because they were durable, reusable, and practically indestructible. You could boil them, drop them, sterilize them, and use them again the next day. The problem was that BPA slowly leached into liquids, especially when heated. Research eventually linked it to hormone disruption and developmental concerns in infants. Canada became the first country to ban BPA in baby bottles in 2008. The United States followed with restrictions shortly afterward. In 1984, there was not a single state in the United States that required you to wear a seatbelt. Not one. Then, on January 1, 1985, New York became the first state in the nation to make seatbelt use mandatory for front seat occupants. By 1989, 31 states had followed. By 1995, every state but New Hampshire had some form of mandatory law. New Hampshire still does not require adults to wear one. In 1984, the legal drinking age in much of the United States was still 18. Some states had 19, some had 21. On July 17, 1984, Ronald Reagan signed the National Minimum Drinking Age Act. It didn't directly mandate 21 as the legal drinking age. It threatened to withhold 10% of federal highway funding from any state that didn't comply. By 1987, every state had raised the age to 21. If you turned 18 in the summer of 1984, you might have had exactly one legal birthday drink before the law changed around you. In the 1980s and 90s, Ephedra was the active ingredient in dozens of diet pills, weight loss products, and energy supplements sold legally at every pharmacy and health food store in North America. The problem was it caused heart attacks, strokes, and seizures. In February 2004, the FDA banned dietary supplements containing ephedrine alkaloids. The first time in history the FDA had ever banned a dietary supplement ingredient outright. The product was legal for the entire decade you remember. The consequences took years to show up. And finally, the chocolate contraband itself, Kinder Eggs. If you grew up in Canada, these were completely ordinary. Chocolate egg, plastic capsule, tiny toy inside. In the United States, they violated federal law. Under a food safety law dating back to 1938, Food products containing embedded non-food objects that pose choking risks are prohibited, which turned a perfectly normal Canadian childhood snack into something U.S. Customs actively confiscated at the border. From candy cigarettes to chocolate contraband, the 1980s really were a different world. The decade wasn't safer, it wasn't cleaner, it definitely wasn't more regulated, but it was unforgettable. And if you grew up during that era, there's a good chance you survived at least 5 things on this list before lunch. Which one surprised you most? Which one did you personally do? And what did we miss entirely? Drop it in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay nostalgic.